presentation will be recorded. You can log back into the platform and access it again at any time. And we are taking questions. So feel free to enter your questions in the chat feature so that way we can answer your questions live this evening as well. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will get started with the Q&A. So Tim, I'll turn it over to you first.
Great. Thank you, Aubrey. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Wold. I'm the Director of Student Services in the Office of Student Financial Aid. I oversee all of our counseling and advising operations. I also oversee some of our scholarships, work study, and our Veterans Education Benefits Office as well. I've been in the office for just a little over 28 years now. I'm also a graduate of the UW. UW is my home, and I wish I was on campus right now providing this information to you from campus. Welcome, and I'll turn this over to my colleague, James Flowers, for his introduction.
Good evening. My name is James Flowers. I'm an Associate Director at the University of Washington in the Financial Aid Office, and I've been there a little over total 23 years with about 27 years of financial aid experience. And I work with a wide range of some of our popular first-year scholarship programs, study abroad, and a lot of miscellaneous other stuff that Tim assigns me to do when we're there in the office, but now that we're working remotely, doing this stuff from home. So welcome.
Great, thank you both. Like I said, I'm here with the experts tonight. As you can tell, Tim and James both have a wealth of experience and knowledge to share with us this evening. But before we get into the question and answers, James and Tim, can you just provide an overview of what financial aid is and what that process looks like at the University of Washington? How do students qualify for financial aid at the UW?
Sure. Yeah, I'll get started, and James, feel free to kind of chime in, and we'll kind of switch back and forth. You know, I think financial aid, the best way to think of it is it's a form of assistance. It's a form of assistance to help you pay for the cost of attendance. And when I say cost of attendance, I'm not just focused on tuition and fees. I'm also thinking about room and board. So housing and food, utilities. I'm thinking about books, textbooks and supplies, course materials, some personal expenses for basic needs, transportation costs. And when I refer to cost of attendance, that's what I'm referring to, and that's what our office is referring to. And financial aid is meant to help provide assistance in the form of scholarships, in the form of grants, in the form of loans, and in the form of federal or state work study programs. And when I talk about grants, those are from federal, state, or institutional sources, and then the federal loan programs, such as the federal Stafford loan. They're all forms of assistance to help you, the student, and the family pay toward the cost of attendance, as a supplement almost to what you can contribute or your own resources to help pay for college. James, do you want to take it from there and kind of talk about just the general application process and what's required?
Yes. At the University of Washington, we only use the FAFSA application. And for those individuals who are Washington State residents who are unable to complete the FAFSA application, we have the WASFA application, which is the Washington State Financial Aid application. Those are primarily the only two applications that we use. We ask that basically students who are unable to complete the FAFSA application, they do complete the WASFA application. And then basically for a lot of times other schools may mention the scholarship application to be considered for some of the financial aid scholarships that we have to offer to our entering first year students. We do not ask for any additional scholarship applications for first year students. We already have that information through your admissions application. So Those are the two primary applications that we use to help determine what types of resources that Tim mentioned that we can help you meet your cost of attendance at the university.
Great. Thank you both for that quick overview of financial aid and the process at the University of Washington. And James, thank you so much for highlighting that at the UW, we don't require any separate applications. That's a question that we get a lot from students. Do I need to file a separate application for scholarships? And so just as a reminder, as James said, no separate applications for scholarships. We review your admissions application for those scholarships available as well. So we're going to dive into the questions, and students and families, feel free to continue to ask those questions throughout the presentation. We really want to address your questions this evening, so please continue to add those questions. We have some really good questions in here so far. So the first question is, I'm an H-4 visa holder, so I don't qualify for the Fafsa, but I am a Washington State resident. Can I get financial aid from the WASFA?
James, go ahead with that.
That's a good question. So one of the criteria for the WASFA, to do the WASFA application, you must meet the criteria to complete the application at Washington Student Achievement Council. That's where the application is located. And some of the criteria that they look at when you log into that particular application, you have to be in the state and to be graduating from a high school or have other credentials to be considered. And you have to be here for at least 3 years prior to completing the application. So if you've been here for 3 years and now you're graduating in June of 2021, then the application will allow you to go through the process to complete the application online. However, if you get to those questions that basically will prompt you to complete the application and you're not able to answer yes to that, the application won't allow you to continue completing the WASFA application. The only types of assistance at that particular point that you would possibly be considered for are departmental scholarships that, depending on your major course of study, to see by contacting them to see if they have any additional scholarships that they can allow students that won't qualify for other types of financial aid assistance from the University of Washington.
Yeah, and I think I would just want to emphasize a couple things with that, with the WASFA application, which is the Washington Application for State Financial Aid. And that can be found at Ready Set Grad. So Ready Set Grad, READYSETGRAD.wa.gov. And a lot of this information, I know I just read that off very quickly, but if you go to our website, if you go to washington.edu and search for financial aid, you'll get in there. There's a tab that says applying for aid, applying for financial aid. And the section there, it does talk about the WASFA application, and we just encourage you to go through that process and try to complete that. If you're not eligible to complete the Fafsa, the free application for federal student aid, we want you to complete that WASFA. We are very fortunate here in the state and at the UW that we do award state and institutional aid to those students that qualify through the WASFA. So if you have any questions about that process, please reach out to us directly, and we'll share our contact information toward the end of this. But please reach out and we can help guide a little bit more with that process.
Great, thank you both. The next question is, I've already filed my Fafsa or WASFA. What do I do now? How long does it take for me to find out how much aid I receive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for those, you've all submitted an application for admission to the University of Washington. So Aubrey will give a little bit of timeline on that piece of it. But generally, once you've been offered admission to the University of Washington, the financial aid process, usually we've been around about 2 weeks later is when you will receive a notice that will tell you what types of financial aid you qualify for. And that notice of financial aid award will list whether or not you qualify for grants, for scholarships through our office, what loans you may qualify for, work study programs, etc. So what we typically say is about the third or fourth week of March is when you could expect to receive a notification from our office. Now we know that you may need to make decisions prior to that. You may be hearing from other schools during this time. One of the things that you can do is you utilize what's called the net price calculator on our website. Again, if you go to our website if you click on the tab that says Getting Started, a couple of the drop-down menu items it talks about cost of attendance, it talks about how need is calculated, talks about the expected family contribution, and then the other thing that's on there is the net price calculator. That gives you the ability to get a really good ballpark or an estimate of what type of aid you are likely to receive. It's based on prior year's information, but it does give you a really good estimate, especially if you're a Washington State resident, as to what you may qualify for. So that at least could give you a ballpark of what you could expect. At any time during this process, you can also reach out directly to our office. All of our counselors would be able to work with you, talk through kind of your eligibility based on the information you submitted on the Fafsa, and we can give some preliminary guidance as well. I hope I answered that question.
And I just wanted to say, and I just wanted to jump in and say that when Tim talks about notification, the notifications are sent electronically. So it's very important to check your email on a regular basis. And also we've heard from students, new students, as well as current students, of how sometimes those emails go to spam or junk mail. So you want to make sure that you're checking to see if you have something in there from the Alpha Student Financial.
I love it. Thanks, James. You actually beat me to my next question, which I was going to ask. How do students check their financial aid award package now that Tim outlined kind of the timeline there? But I will also hop in and just remind students, if you are an autumn 2021 freshman applicant, the notification period for you will be March 1st through the 15th. So it's coming up here in a few months, about 2 months from now. And so you will receive your admissions decision at some point during those 2 weeks. So just keep your eye out for your notification. We will also send you an email letting you know that your status has changed, and you can check your admissions decision in your MyUW portal. If you are an autumn 2021 transfer applicant, as you know, your admissions application deadline isn't until February 15th, and then the notification period for you will be May and June. So just keep that in mind as we're talking about dates and deadlines. It does vary a little bit depending upon your applicant type as well. So just keep that in mind. So the next question, I'm going to throw this one to Tim. What is the average total cost of attendance for Washington State residents? Can you give us a ballpark amount of what that cost of attendance would be for Washington State residents?
Yeah, overall, if we look at all the components that I mentioned earlier, so textbooks, course supplies, room and board, and I'm sorry, I'm old school, so I still say room and board, but really that's rent and food, or housing and food, personal expenses and transportation, those components, along with the tuition and fees. We're just right around $29,000, just kind of hovering right around there. A lot of more information, again, and I'm going to direct you back to our website for that detailed kind of breakdown of all those different components. I'll do my best to estimate here, though, but typically when we're looking at the 9-month period of the academic year, so remember the University of Washington is a quarter-based school, so we've got fall, winter, and spring, those 9 months. Usually right now for that housing and food component, we're just around about 13,500 or so for that 9-month period is our best best estimate of what students spend for housing and food. And that information is based on surveys that we do with students, based on rents in the Seattle area, housing and food service prices on campus, if you're going to live in residence. For personal expenses, so those basic necessity type items are around $2,700. And then transportation we keep low because we do have the UPass program during non-pandemic times, but that's around $460 for that 9-month period, and then tuition and fees on top of that. Tuition for this year, for each quarter, for a full-time Washington State resident, so that's, for tuition purposes, 10 credits through 18, it's about $3,800 per quarter. And I've got some more information on room and board real quick, Aubrey, is that James did let me know that room and board is $13,800. That's the current allowance. Now, keep in mind that not every student is going to spend that for room and board. So it really does depend on your living situation and where you end up living, whether that be on campus, whether you choose to live at home and commute, or whether you're living in off-campus apartment, shared housing, etc.
Great, thanks, Tim. And Vanessa asked the question, what about without housing? So Vanessa, I'm going to refer you to the financial aid website, which is on the slide that you can see right now. You can grab that link and go to the financial aid website. They have a really nice breakdown of that total cost of attendance that really lists everything by item. So if you don't plan to live on campus, if you are a local student and plan to live at home, you can see what that total cost of attendance would be minus that room and board. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I would say, real quick, Aubrey, I would say also on that, and I think that's a great way to think about reducing overall costs. But keep in mind that you still will typically have some food expenditures. If we're being back in session, back on campus, you're going to have food that you'll need to purchase throughout the day or throughout the week or whatever. So keep in mind that even though you may be at home and not paying rent or not having to pay rent where you're living, there's still the food costs as well.
Great. Thanks, Tim, for that reminder. And we have a few questions more so along the lines of timeline, so I'm just going to cover that real quick. As a reminder, our priority deadline, our priority date for the Fafsa or WAFSA is January 15th, so that's coming up this week. A few students have asked, if I haven't been admitted to the university yet, can I still file the Fafsa? The answer is absolutely. We want you to file that Fafsa, even if you haven't been notified of your admission to the university yet. It's most likely that no one that's joining us tonight has received that decision because you're autumn applicants, and we haven't notified our autumn applicants of those decisions yet. So yes, please file that Fafsa or the WASPA now, so that way you're eligible for as much aid as possible. And then I'm going to kick the next question to Tim or James, whoever wants to answer this question. We have some questions about, is all financial aid loans where you need to pay that back, or are there some financial aid programs that do not require repayment of that amount?
James, go ahead on that.
So, yes, as Tim mentioned, that basically financial aid is comprised of grants, which don't have to be paid. So if you receive a financial aid offer, if it says grants, tuition exemption, that's free money that the university is giving you. And the grants are coming from various sources. It's coming from the federal government. We have some state grants. And also the University of Washington has, for Washington State residents, we have some institutional grant funds available. Also, financial aid scholarships, which basically with our office, there's a combination of need as well as merit that we look at. And then you have the loan programs. You borrow now from the federal loan programs. That's the only loan program that's out there outside of the private educational loan, but the federal loans are out there. The Stafford loan program for students, the amounts are determined based upon the number of credits You have basically some of you will be coming in with some AP credits. Some of you will be coming in with some running start credits. So that helps us determine how much in loan money we're able to loan you. You borrow now, and then 6 months after you graduate or you fall below half-time enrollment credits, you start making monthly payments back on your particular loan. And then also there's the Parent Plus loan for dependent students. That program is offered through the federal government as well. And then Tim mentioned about work study. Work study, we have the federal work study program, and in the state of Washington, we're fortunate enough to have a state work study program. And work study is basically a lot of students, they don't want to borrow, so they prefer to work. And with the combination of either federal or state, there's many jobs on campus that you can do, and with the state work study, you can work off campus, and you never know basically where basically your job may land. And then a lot of students gain experience on campus or off campus, and you might have a career upon graduation because you worked in that particular area. And I think Tim and I can both say that basically we ended up in this profession because we were work study students in the financial or student fiscal service office. So basically there's opportunities, and I know several students being in the city of Seattle that have worked for some of our research centers or with the city government, state government. They have been able to land jobs because of the work study experience they've had with those particular organizations. So that comprises financial aid, and it's all there to help you meet your educational costs at the university.
And I think I just would like to add too, a lot of times there's a lot of apprehension from students and families about completing the Fafsa or the WASFA, or some perceptions that aren't quite right in terms of that all you would receive are student loans. That would be the only form of aid that you're going to be eligible for. And I guess my response to that is, as an incoming class entering your first year of college, I think it's really important to complete the FAFSA regardless of what you think your eligibility may be. And the reason I'm saying that too, as Washington residents, there have been some great changes with the Washington College Grant, where the eligibility for Washington College Grant has expanded greatly. And so a year or two ago, maybe you wouldn't have qualified, but because of eligibility changes, you may now qualify for the Washington College Grant. And those amounts vary. There's a whole range of grant amounts. And also, we as an institution have a great deal of institutional need-based grant funds as well. And we've been able to really extend grant aid to families with higher incomes, higher than you may think. And so it is really important to go ahead, get that FAFSA completed. If you haven't already done so, try to tackle that later this evening or tomorrow, and get that submitted by our priority filing date, which is January 15th. So it is coming up, but the only way to really have to know what you may qualify for is to complete the FAFSA or the WASFA. So please take some time and do that. And I think the other thing to mention is the FAFSA looks at, and the WASFA does too, it looks at income from 2 years ago. So calendar year 2019. By now more than likely, most of you have filed your taxes for that year. So you have all of your income and tax information for 2019. That's the income that the FAFSA and WASFA gathers. It looks at the family size, the number in college, it looks at assets, etc. Now, we know also that there's been a lot of changes as a result of the pandemic. So COVID may have impacted you a great deal. It may have caused some disruption to your employment or loss of employment, a disruption or impacted your wages, your earnings, many other things that it may have impacted. We need you to complete that FAFSA with the baseline information first, and then you'll reach out to us work with our office, explain what the changes are. I'll let James talk about the actual process, but in general, you're going to want to communicate what those changes are to us so we can then look at what your current situation is or what your projected situation is to see if we can help you with like some grants or some work study programs or some scholarships. So just keep that in mind that you got to apply. And that's one of my main messages this evening is please be sure that you've completed that FAFSA. Try to do it in the next couple days.
Yeah, and what Tim was saying about, if there's changes that have occurred, the 2019 calendar year's income is no reflection of what you or your parents' current financial situation is. Let us know. And we've tried to simplify the process over the years. Basically, a lot of times families feel that, when they communicate this information, there's a particular form. We do have forms on our website that individuals can submit the information that we're going to need to take a look at. But sometimes families, they want to write a letter. Your parents want to write a letter to explain the circumstances that can have occurred. And basically, the form doesn't give you all of the space or that you're going to need to explain your circumstances. So writing a letter, communicating the changes to us or submitting it on one of our forms is a way to get that information to us. And we will take a look at it, and we individually take the time to read through, analyze the information that has come in from the WASP or the FAFSA application, and to see how we best can assist you during these particular changes. Now, one thing that we look at, a lot of times people say, well, I'm not going to complete it because in the past I've never qualified for anything, or you may not qualify for anything this year. But always complete the application, because you never know when we start going through the academic year, when we may have, Tim spoke of the grant funds that we have, and basically students that started this current year, 2021, initially they may not have qualified for grant money, but basically we were able to go back and take a look and offer them some grant funds even months after the school year started. So it's very important to get the application in and hopefully meet not hopefully, but to ensure you meet our priority date.
I love it. Thanks so much, Tim and James, both for your reminder of the importance of filing that FAFSA or the WASPA. James, can you clarify for me really quickly? We do have a couple students who have asked, can you complete both the FAFSA and the WASPA, or do you do one as opposed to the other? Can you clarify for us real quick?
Yes. So students that are able to complete the FAFSA application have the criteria to complete the FAFSA application. Not all students have that criteria to complete the FAFSA application. That's why the WASPA is made available. So we don't recommend that you complete both. If you're able to complete the FAFSA application, start with that, because the FAFSA application allows us to consider you for the grant funds from the federal government, whereas the WASPA, we can only consider you for state and institutional. So, but basically, if you're able to complete the FAFSA application because you meet all the criteria to complete the FAFSA application, go that route. But for those students that are unable to complete the FAFSA application, you want to go to the WASP application. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you, James. I think that is definitely helpful to help clarify which application students should submit. I'm going to answer a quick question here from Kathleen. Kathleen has asked, does the University of Washington track or consider demonstrated interest? The answer is no. At the University of Washington, we do not consider demonstrated interest for purposes of admission to the university or for financial aid. So we'll just set that baseline here so that way you know demonstrated interest is not considered. Our next question is, from Sergio. Sergio asks, I heard of something called the Husky Promise. What is it and how do you qualify for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Husky Promise is the University of Washington's commitment to students that qualify based on the Fafsa or the WASFA. So once again, you've got to apply in order to be considered. So make sure you're getting that Fafsa or WASFA done. But really is what it is, the Husky Promise is that you, if you go ahead and apply, you meet the eligibility requirements. And basically the eligibility requirements are that you're going to apply every year, that you have the demonstrated financial need, that you're a Pell Grant recipient or Pell Grant eligible, or in that eligibility range. And then the commitment is that we will award you grant aid enough to cover your tuition. And that's what the Husky Promise is. And so when you receive your notification that details what types of financial aid you're eligible for, you're not going to necessarily see anything that says Husky Promise. But what you would see if you're eligible, you'll see a full range of grant aid that will meet your quarterly tuition. So that's what the Husky Promise is all about. More information is also on the University of Washington's website. You can just go to washington.edu and search Husky Promise. It'll take you right to the Husky Promise web pages as well. James, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add about Husky Promise. I do know that the I don't want to give the wrong information, the number of years, but I know that we're close to 9,000 or 10,000 students each year.
Year 11.
What's that? We're in year 11 of that. Yeah, year 11 of the Husky Promise program. And I think we reach about 9,000 to 10,000 students per year through Husky Promise.
Yes. And what I just want to say, because I don't want to, we don't want students that are only able to complete the WASFA application to be saying that they're not going to be eligible for the Husky Promise, because they are, because of the combination of the state grant funds as well as institution grant funds. Basically, the students are obtaining or receiving the same amount of money that basically students that are completing the FAFSA application with the combination of federal, state, and institutional. So the state and institutional grant funds will make it so even though they don't qualify for Pell Grant, they still have enough resources in the grant funding that we offer to them for completing the WASFA application. We do meet the conditions of meeting their quarterly tuition amount, and more so.
Great. Our next question is, do I have to add each UW campus that I'm applying to on my FAFSA?
That's a great question. No, you do not. All three campuses share the same school code, which is 003798. And so you just go ahead and complete the FAFSA, and then through the admissions process, because you're doing and Aubrey, you can correct the admissions piece here, but you're applying to the different UW Bothell or UW Tacoma, UW Seattle, and then based on those offers of admission into each of those campuses, we construct your financial aid eligibility based on that.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. I love that you even have the school code memorized. I would expect nothing else. Like you've said it a couple times.
Remember I said 28 plus years or so.
I love it. Great. So we have some questions from students about what is required. So as a student files the FAFSA, how do they ensure that that information is then sent to the University of Washington? What steps do they need to take to make sure that we receive their FAFSA information?
Yeah, well, really, I think it's pretty straightforward. When you complete the FAFSA or the WASFA, you list what schools you want that information sent to. And by listing the University of Washington with the school code of 003798, we will automatically get that information. So you submit the FAFSA, say you submit it today, or this evening or tomorrow morning, we will likely be able to access that FAFSA and load that back into our systems probably in about a week or 10 days, maybe even a little bit sooner. When your FAFSA or WASFA, when it hits our system, when it hits the UW student database and our financial aid systems, we will then generate and send out a communication to you that says, hi, we have your FAFSA information and kind of the next steps. So again, checking your email and all of that is very important. But all that you have to do is just make sure you list the University of Washington and the school code.
And I would like to add to that, because the FAFSA application only allows up to 10 schools. So you may say, well, I included 10 schools and it didn't allow me any room to add the University of Washington. If the federal government has already processed your FAFSA application, you receive what they call a student aid report, which is all the information you put on your FAFSA application. It lists the first 10 schools. What you can do is go in and remove one of those schools and add the University of Washington. The federal government will keep the original 10, but you're adding an additional school so that we can receive your application. So you would need to do that hopefully within the next few days or so that you're completing the application by our priority date. But that's the process for those students that say, well, I was only able to list 10 schools on the application.
Great. Thank you for that tip, James. That's really helpful for our students to know who may be applying to more than 10 institutions. There's a question that I'm going to address. It's in regard to admission, so I'll address that really quickly. And the question is, does applying to financial aid affect the admission outcome in any way? The answer is no. At the University of Washington, we do not consider your financial picture when we are making an admissions decision. However, as Tim and James have both encouraged you this evening, we do encourage all students to file the FAFSA or the WASFA, dependent upon what they're eligible for. So that way you can see how much financial aid you may be eligible for at the UW. You may be eligible for more aid than you initially think, but it will not impact your admission to the university.
And Aubrey, I just wanted to add on to that. When students complete the FAFSA application, we don't even see what other schools that you sent the FAFSA to. So we only see that you're sending the application to the University of Washington.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying, James. I think that's probably reassuring for our families to know that we don't see all of the schools that they are applying to or have sent that information to. Another admissions related question that I'll address really quickly. If I'm a running start student right now, am I still going to be a freshman since I have college credits? The answer is, for admissions purposes, yes, you would apply as a freshman applicant, but you may enter the university at a higher standing than freshman, dependent upon how many credits you have completed. But for purposes of your admissions application, you will apply as a freshman applicant because you're taking those running start classes while you're still enrolled in high school as well. The next question is, what happens if a student applies for the FAFSA after January 15th? What is the impact that that has on a student?
Yeah, I'll take that. It's a pretty significant, it can be a pretty significant impact because that January 15th priority filing date is pretty important. If you miss that, then we can't consider you for all the different types of grants and scholarships. So the institutional grant money, we cannot consider you for. We wish we had plenty of funding to award all applicants regardless of when you completed the FAFSA, but that's not quite the case. We don't have that much, but it's really important that that deadline or that priority date be met by January 15th. Now, we do understand, you're attending this this webinar and you're getting a lot of information. I'm hoping that you'll go and complete the FAFSA or the WASFA and meet that January 15th. We do have an appeal process. If you can't get everything in by the 15th, say it's next week or after the 15th, go ahead, or the end of January, we have a late Fafsa appeal. You can go ahead and complete that and explain the circumstances, and then we review that, and hopefully we would then consider you a priority aid applicant. But it is pretty important, especially if you are a student with, from that you need really that help, that assistance. You don't have many resources to help contribute toward your cost of attendance. It's pretty important that you meet that priority filing date. And that is something that every year you have to do. So October 1 of every year, the new FAFSA opens up. The priority filing date is January 15th. We do send out reminders to our students to complete that application, but it is something that every year you really do need to do. The impact can be at times kind of severe if you miss that deadline. So I'm not trying to scare anyone here. It's just, it is really important that that filing date be met.
Great, thanks, Tim. For those students that may have already filed their FAFSA or WASFA, we have some questions about how do we know if our FAFSA was received by the University of Washington?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I saw some of these, there are quite a few of you that have that. By now, and James, please correct me, but I believe we have sent out all acknowledgments at this point. If you did your FAFSA back in October, November, December, you should have received some acknowledgement from us at this point. Would have been in the form of an email. And again, it's a pretty straightforward, hey, we have your FAFSA application or your WASFA application. You should have received that by now. If you haven't, you might want to go back into your FAFSA application, review it to make sure that you indeed listed the University of Washington on that application, that the school code was in there correctly, or you may need to add us still, so go ahead and do that. If that's not the case, please reach out to us. Again, the contact information Aubrey will share, but please reach out to our office and we can take a look.
Great, thanks, Tim. And James, I'm going to throw this question back to you. It's something that we had discussed earlier in the Q&A, but I wanted just to confirm with you. So earlier we were talking about if a student's circumstances have changed since 2019 when they would have been using the taxes for their FAFSA. If a student's family situation has changed after that tax year, a few students have asked, when would we notify the University of Washington of that change? You had mentioned a letter that they could maybe send to your office. When would that time frame be for students to notify us of that change in their situation?
Well, we've already started receiving letters for students that have applied to the university, and they're just trying to get a jump on as far as submitting that letter to our office. Even though we may not be able to respond to the letter right now because we don't know whether or not the student's been admitted to the university. The students can, we received letters if students and parents wanted to take that approach. I know our forms, they're being finalized now. I don't know the time frame as far as the forms that for the 21-22 academic year will be available online, and Tim can jump in at the end to see if there's a time frame on those particular forms being added to our website. But if families want to provide us with a letter of those circumstances, they can. And then basically what we can do is we can match that information to their financial aid file once they're accepted to the university. And then a counselor or one of the managers will review that information, and we'll be able to get back. If we need clarifying information, we'll be able to communicate that as well to the student and or parent.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely correct. And I think, a lot of times in the financial aid world, we're very forms driven. We have a form for this and a form for that. And form for everything. And so I don't want you to get too caught up in that or frustrated by that process, but we do have to document any reason for changes, etc. But James is absolutely correct. You can send us an email. You can send us a letter, however you want to get us the information. Just try to provide as much detail as you can in that written statement. So talk about what caused the change, what the change is, if it impacted both parents, one parent, who it's impacted, kind of the change in what you're anticipating for calendar year, what was your calendar year 20 income, what you think your 21 income will be, and kind of really give us as much detail as possible. And I will let you know that if we don't get that level of detail, sometimes you might get something back from us then that will say, we really need you to complete this request form here and provide the level of detail that we need. But if any point in this process that you're just feeling like you're not getting the information or you need more guidance, again, please reach out so one of our financial aid counselors can work with you at any point in the process. The other thing I do want to mention is that when you reach someone in our office, whether it be by email, it's really tough right now because we're not in person, as you can imagine. And so we have email or we have phone appointments, and all that information's on our website again. But whoever responds to the email or whoever you have a phone appointment with, they're all professional financial aid counselors. They've all have several years of experience, and they should be able to help you from start to finish at any point along the way.
Great. And our colleagues in financial aid are very helpful. So please do not hesitate, like Tim said, to ask questions as you have them. They're all very helpful and easy to work with. So appreciate you and your team, Tim, helping us as we assist students make the transition to the UW. We have a few questions about scholarships. So I just wanted to address a couple pieces about scholarships from the admissions office perspective. So again, just to confirm, you do not need to complete a separate application for scholarship consideration at the University of Washington. Your admissions application does serve as your scholarship application. I'm going to put a link in the chat to our admissions website that has scholarship information on it as well. And we've gotten a couple questions about scholarships, so I just want to hit on a couple that the admissions office provides specifically. So one scholarship that the admissions office provides or awards is for in-state residents. It's called the Presidential Scholar Award, and that is for in-state students. It's a competitive scholarship that is awarded based on the holistic review of your application, but we're really focusing on those honors and distinctions and your essay responses and the activities that you're involved in. We're looking to see more about who you are and your commitment to your community, and really how you've demonstrated leadership and responsibility throughout high school. That scholarship is competitive. We only award a small number of those scholarships each year. Last year we awarded 8. In previous years we've awarded 13 or 15, so it kind of depends on the funding that we have available each year. But again, nothing additional that you need to do. If you're a Washington State resident, you will be automatically considered for that award as we review your application. For those of you that may be out-of-state students joining us this evening, we do have the Purple and Gold Scholarship. The Purple and Gold Scholarship is for our U.S. students who do not live in the state of Washington. That scholarship is also awarded based on the holistic review of your application. So we're considering your academic preparation and performance and those personal characteristics and achievements. So really looking at all of that information that you provided in your coalition application to award that scholarship. Typically each year, around 50% of the students who are admitted from out of state receive some version of Purple and Gold. Last year, the dollar amount ranged from $3,000 to $8,400. That's the 1-year amount, and it is renewable for 4 years as long as you maintain academic eligibility at the UW. But again, I'll put a link to that scholarship page in the chat so you can review that on our website as well. And if you have questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to our office about those scholarships too. And Tim and James, we've gotten a couple more questions just about the timeline. So while we're here and have a few more minutes, can you remind us of the timeline? I'll start with the admissions timeline, and then if you can fill in the gaps of when the financial aid award would be processed. So for freshman applicants, freshman autumn 2021 applicants, your admissions decision will be sent between March 1st and March 15th. If you are a transfer applicant for autumn 2021, you will receive your admissions decision in May or June. And transfer applicants, just as a reminder, your application deadline is coming up on February 15th. And then Tim and James, if you'll share the financial aid timeline.
Sure, and I want to follow up on some scholarship questions as well. But in terms of the timelines, for those freshman applicants for fall of 21, you could expect to hear from us no later than the end of March, providing that you've completed your Fafsa and WASFA application by that priority filing date. Even if you didn't hit that date, even if you had applied later in February, we should still be able to get that offer so you can see what financial aid programs you qualify for. For transfer students, it would probably be, if you were notified in May, we would probably let you know toward the end of May or sometime first part of June in terms of what your eligibility is. Again, please use that net price calculator, all the information on the website as well to help guide you, or at least give you some preliminary estimates of the types of aid you would qualify for. I also wanted to talk about scholarships just real quick. Aubrey mentioned a few that the admissions office does. I do want to also let you know that by completing the FAFSA or the WASFA, we then also look at your eligibility for scholarships that we administer as an office. We have about 280 different scholarship accounts that we would look at your eligibility for. They are based on financial need and merit. So it's a combination of need and merit for our Washington State residents. We typically end up with about 600 students receiving some form of scholarship through our office. The awards are generally for 2 years and $4,000 for each of those years. So another reason to go ahead and get that FAFSA submitted so we can then determine whether or not you might qualify for any of those scholarships that we administer. Scholarships at the UW is pretty decentralized. So there's the admissions piece, the financial aid piece. If you're applying to a specific department or in a different field of study, those departments, those schools and colleges on campus may also have scholarships. So you could reach out to them as well.
Great, thanks, Tim. And so just to make sure everyone is following, you will first receive your admissions decision to the university, and then you will receive your financial aid notification. You have to be admitted to the university to receive aid from the university. So just keep that in mind. Really the first thing you'll hear back from is if you are admitted to the university, and then everything else will happen from there. Let me find a couple. We're about 6 minutes out from time, so I want to make sure we can answer some more questions from our students here. The next question is, do you have to complete the FAFSA every year?
Yes, you do. Every year you should complete a FAFSA. And that's, I'm just going to say this just in general as a financial aid professional. I mean, regardless, I'm hopeful that you will all be at the University of Washington, but if you choose a different school and you're somewhere else, it's the same process. You're going to want to make sure that every year you are completing the necessary financial aid materials, regardless of what school you're at.
Great, thank you. The next question is coming from Alexandra. The question is there a way to negotiate college tuition?
Negotiate college tuition at the University of Washington? No. The tuition, I mean, that's a very direct answer that I just gave you, but the answer is no. The University of Washington does not negotiate the tuition and fees.
Great, thanks, Tim. The next question is, there was a section in the UW Coalition application that asked us to talk about how COVID has impacted our family or financial prospects, as well as our personal academic prospects. Will the financial aid office see this section, or should we send a letter directly to the financial aid office?
You would need to send a letter directly to the financial aid office, or if you wait until a few more weeks, probably in February, we would have the actual form on our website, which is called a revision request for a change in parent financial situation. But you would need to let us know directly.
Great, thank you. Couple of questions that are along those lines, so I think you answered that question, Tim. Looking for a few more questions here. If I receive a scholarship, does it affect my financial aid package in any way?
James, do you want to take that one?
Yes, and if you're receiving scholarships, and I'm assuming that's from an outside source, non-university scholarship, and yes, we do have to take those scholarships in consideration. We ask that students report that information to us as soon as they're aware. Once they're accepted to the university, they receive a financial aid offer. If they can let us know if they're receiving third-party scholarships, providing the scholarship name as well as the dollar amount. We have to take that into consideration as a resource. Sometimes that reduces, we start out basically if there's any unmet need or if there's loans that met financial need, we start reducing the unmet need first, then we work our way to loans, then work study, and then possibly grant or scholarships that we may have awarded that covered financial need. Unfortunately, that is the process that we have to go with to make sure that students are staying in the area of cost of attendance, as well as primarily the financial need component. So we do have to take that into consideration.
Great, thank you. And as we are running out of time tonight, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our event this evening. Thank you for joining us, students and families. We hope that you got a lot of really great financial aid information this evening. Thank you to James and Tim for joining me and being our experts this evening on the panel. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience about the financial aid process. We truly appreciate it. As a reminder, students and families, this presentation is recorded, so you can log back into this platform at any time to view this presentation if you want to review the answers to the questions that were asked as well. On the slide, you will see our contact information. This is the admissions office information. If you have questions about admission to the university, please feel free to reach out to us. You can also contact the financial aid office as well. And I had their information on the previous slide, and I will switch back to that so you can see their website as well. But thank you for joining us this evening. Again, if you have any questions, please let us know. We're here to help. And if you've applied for freshman admission, you will be notified of your admissions decision between March 1st and March 15th. If you are a prospective transfer applicant, the application deadline is coming up on February 15th for autumn 2021, and you will be notified of your admissions decision in May and June. Thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great night, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.